You'll, if you don't watch until the end of the video, someone's gonna pinch you really, really hard. What are we talking about today? Well, the Villainess falls for the Notorious Noble. If you haven't watched these videos before, I'm gonna give you a rating off the bat, and then I'm gonna go into why I gave you that rating. I'm not really going to go into any spoilers or anything. It's mostly just going to be general, just should you read it or not? My basic thoughts on it, nothing super over the top. For this one, I think it kind of goes between like a 6 and a 7, depending on you. If you want to know which one you lean toward, maybe watch until the end of the video. Okay, well, what's the gist? Well, it is an isekai. Yes, I always do isekai. This character is reincarnated into a tome game, thing like that, where she's the villain because yes, of course, they can't be the heroine. It always has to be the villain because. And I'll give it a little credit. Typically when they say like, oh, I want to turn things for the better and make the villain, the good person in the end, they don't really do that, but they just straight up go like, bang, she did everything, and, she's still not necessarily in the best position, but she did redeem her character. But it also, I think, gives you the first sign of where things are going to go a little wonky in this series. I will say that the series is basically just like a romance. It's between these two characters. This is like the, like the fourth prince or whatever, and he's like the prince that everyone sees in a negative light, but in reality he's a relatively good person. The generic path. But I think the most prominent element of this series, if we're going to talk about it, it's like if you took like one of these otome isekai reincarnation stories and just speed ran it like 400 miles an hour. So like in a typical story, it's like, you're going through, they get reincarnated, maybe something, a little bit bad happens when they try to change their fate, but then they eventually meet the right person, and then you slowly go along these like this track. This one, it hits all of the same points, but it's like if you took this track, went here, and then put like all the same points on this. So basically, it's just a speed run of an isekai story. The best way to say it, I guess, would just be like, I don't know. She gets reincarnated. They skip, I think it's 3 years right off the bat. And they're just like, oh, yeah, she just, became good for this time and blah, blah, blah. And then they're just moving on to the next half of the story. And it's like, we skipped a lot. A typical story, there might be a time skip, but that would probably be within this first chunk or maybe the second chunk. This one just didn't even show it. There was no chunk to... It was just, boom, skipped. Which I think is the first sign, like, this is speed running an isekai story. So we see the whole, the original male lead is going to, dump his fiancée for the female lead. They slightly allude to the former female lead kind of being like a, I don't know what you want to call her, an asshole. They kind of allude to the villainess and her forming a little bit of a, friendship over the time, that 3-year time gap. But the female lead still seems to get with her fiancé, which shows he's a little bit of an asshole, but she's also not relevant. She rarely comes up in the story. So, I mean, the female lead is kind of... The original female lead is basically not even relevant. the original male lead does play a little bit of a role, but it's kind of sidelined. You know, he'll try. I think maybe once or twice you see him try to remove her from the picture, but the reasons for him doing it are a lot less understandable, considering they claim that throughout that time she never had that moment to, like, oh, you're the villain, you did all these evil things, we can't believe you. There was never that moment, which is a little weird. So the main bulk of the story ends up just... It kind of skips a lot of those tropes and just has them as sideline things where you assume that they happen. The main bulk of the story is just the main character who's the villain in the original story, and then the, fourth prince who is like the, crappy prince that everyone thinks is like a crazy, evil person. It's the main bulk of the story is just like their connection to each other and just seeing like that, that romance. Which, I mean, is fine, but it's kind of weird even having those other elements where they set up most of the elements that you would see in a typical isekai, but then just kind of blew past it. I mean, I'm not saying it's wrong or right, it's just weird. It's very, very weird. Like I said, the series is definitely trying to speedrun. There are times where they'll introduce like an extra villain on the side, like, I don't know, one of the other princes tries to go after her and mess her up, but the entire situation gets solved, I don't know, like 5 seconds. He's just out of the picture. And then she'll change his mind, she doesn't hold a grudge, and they just move on from it. It's like, whoa, okay, that was quick. And then just randomly they'll introduce another villain, and you're like, I don't know who the hell that guy is, where did he come from? They're just like, I don't know, then he'll try to mess up their relationship for no real reason, just because he wants to, and they'll and they often allude to like a bigger plot with these characters, but they never show it. That's the thing. I think because they're trying to go through it so fast, it feels like they're not trying to they're trying to allude to things without showing anything, which is really weird. But like, you'll just see these randomly, where it's like all the elements are there for an isekai, but it feels like it's going at 100 miles an hour. I mean, 100 miles a minute. I think if I was going to explain this story to anybody in like the simplest terms, if you had a typical story that's between 1 and 100 chapters, let's say, like just a typical isekai basic reincarnation story, 1 to 100 chapters. This story is like if you did that entire story in 10 chapters. It's 1 to 10. It is a blitz. It is going through this story like it's on, freaking, I don't know, it's on fire. It's crazy. But I really think that's most of what I could say about it. It's your typical isekai story. It's not really doing anything fancy, but it's just a mile a minute. I guess in the video I'll do the SAE. Now, what is the SAE? Well, it's story, art, enjoyment. If we're talking story, I mean, it's not fleshed out. I really don't think it's anything special. I also don't necessarily know if I would say there's anything wrong with it. So I don't know. I think like a 5 or a 6 would be relatively fair. Art-wise, it's pretty good. I actually think the art's solid. I think a 7 would be understandable. I wouldn't say the designs are anything super unique, but it's well done. Enjoyment? I'm not going to lie. It's their romance and their relationship and just seeing them, make it through all the trials and tribulations. I think it deserves an 8. It's actually, I enjoyed it. I think, yeah, I really liked it. I don't know. Maybe it was just my cup of tea. I don't know. I think like objectively, there's a lot of faults with the series, but I think that I I I can't lie. I enjoyed it. So if I was going to give it like a general rating, it would probably be about a 6 or a 7. I think that would be fair. I mean, if we're looking at like story, I think more often than not it's a 5. Which is why, you know, that probably hinders it a lot. Like it really isn't doing much special. If we're talking art, I think it is a consistent 7. It is a very, very consistent 7. If we're talking enjoyment, I mean, I think it's mostly just like something I like in terms of taste. I don't know if it would necessarily be for everybody. Like, I would give it an 8, but I, I don't think it would be unreasonable for someone to give it like a 6 or a 7. Like, I don't really think that would be crazy. So, I mean, overall, yeah, I don't know. I think if we're looking between the 6 and a 7, I think the 6 is probably the most fair rating. But, I don't know. I think it was just it's a satisfying read if you have the time, but it's not necessarily something I would go out of my way for. I think it's just a fun short read. But yeah, I don't know. I'd appreciate if you could like, comment, subscribe, maybe leave another story you want me to read down below. Even if I've read it, I'll read it again. That's fine. I don't care. Yeah, I'll see ya.